A granary can be full, and a village can still starve. That sounds impossible. The grain has already been harvested. The doors are locked. The sacks are stacked. From the outside, the hardest part is over. But winter does not care how full the building looked in autumn. For most of human history, growing grain was only half the battle. The other half happened in darkness, after the harvest had disappeared behind mud walls, wooden doors, clay jars, and heavy lids. Inside, the food was still changing. A grain kernel looks dry and dead. It is neither. It contains moisture. It gives off small amounts of heat. It reacts to the air around it. If it enters storage too wet, the whole pile can begin to warm. That heat encourages mold. Mold creates more heat. Soon, a safe reserve becomes a damp, sour mass. No enemy army has to arrive. No field has to fail. Hunger can begin inside a locked room. Early farmers understood the need to save food between harvests. They buried grain in pits. They sealed it inside pottery. They built raised baskets and small storehouses. These methods could work well when the amount was limited, and someone checked it often. But every method demanded a choice. Seal the container tightly, and you might keep out insects and rain. Seal damp grain inside, and you trap the problem with the food. Leave the grain open to dry, and you reduce moisture. Leave it open too long, and birds, rodents, and insects find it. Raise it from the ground, and you escape some dampness. Build the floor badly, and rain or groundwater still creeps in from below. There was no single safe container. Survival depended on timing, weather, construction, and constant attention. Then agriculture changed the scale of the risk. A household might lose one jar and survive on the others. A growing settlement needed much more. Leaders collected grain for winter, trade, taxes, soldiers, drought, and seed for the next planting season. Small stores became communal granaries. Communal granaries became symbols of security. The bigger the pile, the safer everyone felt. That feeling could be deadly. Large stores were easier to count and guard, but harder to inspect. A dry surface could hide wet grain deeper inside. Heat could build in the center. Insects could breed between kernels where no one could see them. Rats could enter through a gap at night, eat what they wanted, and foul far more than they consumed. Damage began in grams, then kilograms, then entire sections of the store. By the time the smell changed, the loss might already be impossible to stop. This is the hidden weakness of stored food. A full building measures quantity, not safety. A village could possess enough grain by weight to survive the winter, yet not enough edible grain. Some sacks would be eaten through. Some would be wet. Some would be black with mold. Some would contain insects. Some grain would still look usable, forcing people to make a terrible choice. Throw it away and face hunger now. Eat it and risk sickness later. The granary had been built to defeat famine. Now, it concentrated famine behind one door. This was more than ordinary spoilage. It was scale collapse. A solution that protected one family could become dangerous when expanded for an entire community. Central storage reduced theft and simplified distribution, but it also created a single point of failure. One leaking roof, one damp floor, one overlooked infestation, or one badly dried harvest could threaten everyone at once. The same logic followed grain into towns, kingdoms, ports, and armies. More people required more stored calories. More grain meant deeper piles, longer storage, and less room for error. A society could grow enough food and still fail to deliver edible food when it was needed most. Humans did not solve this with one brilliant invention. They solved it by slowly turning storage into a system. The first step happened before the grain entered the building. It had to be harvested at the right time and dried properly. Wet grain could not be made safe by a strong door. The second step was separation. Instead of trusting one enormous pile, careful storekeepers divided grain into smaller lots. If one section failed, the rest might survive. The third step was distance from moisture. Floors were raised, walls were sealed, roofs improved, containers were lifted away from damp ground. Air could move beneath or around the stored crop. The fourth step was inspection. Grain had to be touched, smelled, turned, and checked. A storehouse was not a place where food was forgotten. It was a machine that required human attention. The fifth step was defense. Cracks were blocked. Containers were hardened. Openings were shaped to resist rodents. Spilled grain was removed before it attracted more pests. None of these measures looked as dramatic as harvesting a field, but together they protected the harvest after the celebration ended. Later, storage systems became larger and more controlled. Grain moved into purpose-built warehouses and silos. Workers measured temperature and moisture. Ventilation reduced hot spots. Damaged batches could be isolated. Old stock could be rotated before it became worthless. The basic lesson never changed. Food security is not the amount grown in one season. It is the amount that remains safe until the next one. That difference helped make larger settlements possible. It supported trade, armies, cities, and populations that no longer grew all their own food. Modern life depends on this invisible interval between harvest and consumption. A loaf of bread may begin in a field, but civilization survives in the months after the field is empty. The ancient granary was one of humanity's most important tools. It was also a warning. Concentrating food creates power. It also concentrates risk. A full storehouse is not proof that hunger has been defeated. It is only a promise. That promise must be protected from water, heat, insects, rodents, neglect, and time. Because sometimes starvation does not begin with an empty harvest. Sometimes it begins with a full granary and one small problem no one can see. Subscribe to BlueLine History for more stories about everyday problems, human solutions, and the history behind modern life.